All right, all right, all right. Aloha Friday Live, everybody. Thank you for being with me tonight. I am so blessed to have Bobby with me. We're going to be talking about leadership, storytelling, and how you can get to the position of using your own personal story to get you ahead. But before we get into all of that, Bobby, thank you for being with me tonight. Thank you for taking the time. I know you're a busy guy. As we discuss this topic of leadership, before we get into it, if you wouldn't mind just giving me a recap of what made Bobby to this day.
Hey everybody, Bobby Umar here. I am a professional speaker by trade for the past 17 years. I've traveled around the world across 4 continents. I've delivered over 1,000 keynotes and workshops and training sessions, mostly on the areas of authentic connection networking, around leadership development, thought leadership, personal branding, as well as digital marketing, leveraging LinkedIn, Twitter, social audio, and things like that. I'm a 5-time TEDx speaker. I'm an Inc. Magazine Top 100 Leadership Speaker. And the last couple of years in the pandemic, I've also dived into doing more coaching and online programs to help people get clarity in their personal brand, use storytelling, use content, use relationship building to get their thought leadership brand to that next level so that they can get speaking gigs, TEDx talks, books, and leads for their business. So that's what I do.
Amazing. And, you have a candidate right here, right? So I'm talking to you, Bobby, but I know, and I've been following your work, so I know we have some work to do in the future. But we're talking about before the show went live about leadership, the things that cause leaders to hide behind a facade of, maybe they feel like they have to be a certain person versus themselves, and they negate the power behind their own personal story. And so, just as a a place to start off with, what would you tell a leader that is doing that right now and is basically putting themselves aside for the sake of maybe someone else's perception of what they should be, instead of using who they are?
Yeah, I think the old paradigm of leadership is this idea of authoritarian, the boss telling you what to do and whatnot, and being so-called strong and not showing weakness and things like that. But that's old news. I mean, people want to connect on a deeper level. People want to feel like they're heard. People want to be empowered. They want to be inspired. And so I think the new paradigm for leadership now, and this has been going on for a couple of years now, is particularly the pandemic, though, is that, they want to feel connected. So leaders now need to stop being authoritarians. They need to stop being that old school boss and actually be a leader that actually shares with their employees their story, what they've been going through, how they're dealing with things, share their knowledge, of course, share their support, be a coach, be a champion, empower your employees. And the best way to do this is through storytelling, right? Stories do many things. One, it connects with your employees on a human level, an emotional level. Number 2, it shows employees the journey you've been on, where you've gone. And by teaching your lessons along the way, you're teaching your employees that they too can be where you are, but also you've been where they've been. And so you've been working hard to learn and grow and develop and evolve as a leader. And so they understand that. And then finally, stories can inspire your employees. Stories will inspire your employees to take action. There's a call to action. There's a place to go. There's a bliss point to achieve. There's a lesson in everything that you're talking about. And so by telling those stories, you are able to do all of that. Plus, give your employees a sense that, yeah, we're connected. We're all on the same team. I'm not just your boss. I'm here in the trenches with you. I'm rowing with you. I'm pulling the rope with you. I'm here with you to help us get ourselves, our team, and our organization to that next level.
And what a powerful position to be in. You talk about authoritative type of position where you're always barking at stuff and do, which is probably the least powerful position you could be in, because it it only it only resides in you. Your people will never give you that power. They just do what you say, but they're not actually giving you the power as a leader. They're just actually just doing what you want them. And you mentioned earlier on the fact of emotions, right? So I came from a military background, not many emotions there, right? It's a let's go. We got this mission. We got to go, 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 go. But at the latter part of my service, I saw that the more emotional. Now, I'm not talking about crying at a dime, right? Or at the drop of a dime, but the more emotionally connected a leader was, even in the military, the more they got out of their people. Uh, to your point, to your second point, they need to feel that this is one. He's one of us. And I was telling you, right, that the story about me using that platform of vulnerability to allow these young sailors at the time to know that, hey, just because you see the shiny brass and the stars and the silver, it doesn't mean I'm any higher than you. uh, I came from where you are. So you're actually looking at your possible future. So, but you didn't always start in storytelling, right? So what got you into the business and of storytelling and getting people trained to do so?
Well, I mean, I had many different careers. I was an engineer, then I was in brand marketing on the side. I ran a musical theater company. I did a little bit of teaching on the side. But I think that once I had dove into my personal brand and decided I wanted to become a professional speaker by trade, then I realized when I went out there, what's the best way to get people's attention and to do well as a speaker. And I remember the first speech I ever did, my first speaking gig, I remember it was February of 2007 at a university. And I talked about the 3 Ps of leadership, is what I called it back then. And, I started out by relating to the audience because they were young students. And I talked about, it was about entrepreneurship and young leaders. And I talked about my days when I was a young person working in junior achievement, which was helping start companies as a high school kid, and how I had a lemonade stand. I used to collect blueberries and raspberries and sell them in the neighborhood. And I was always very entrepreneurial. And I told that story. And, at the time, I didn't know how good the story would be. I just said, let me tell the story. And I remember, and one of the reasons I've done really well as a speaker is that I always take feedback. I get people to tell me what they think, what they liked. Afterwards, they always say, hey, Bobby, you love that speech. I'm like, great. What did you like about it? What can I do better? I'd always ask that question. And the first thing that came about was like, oh, I just love that story about the lemonade stand. That was really cool. Or I loved your story about, working in a company in grade 10 and grade 11 and what you learned. I'm like, oh, okay, cool. I started to realize then back that, stories were a great way to, sell my business, but also get my message across. And then after a while, I started to become really good at networking. Networking and authentic connection became my main topic. And I was the networking expert. I had a book on networking. I started talking about how to network effectively. And every single time I talk about different things, and here are the 3 things I want to remember. Every single one had a story behind it. And they were funny, they were engaging. I had to get people to envision it. And every single time I would ask for feedback, they'd always remember the story. They'd always remember the laughing. They'd always remember the scene that I created for them. They're like, yeah, that was awesome. And so at that point, I realized the stories were a big part of it. So I started building a database. What I started doing was I started looking at all the different things I want to talk about. And actually, before I even became a professional speaker, I used to do interviews, right? So I used to keep track of all the interviews of, like, when someone's in an interview, what's your strength? What's your weakness? What's your biggest obstacle? I started creating a database of stories I would use in interviews. Because when I got in interviews, I was actually very, very good. Good personality. I would really charm them with my stories. And so I had a database already. So then the question was, well, what are the stories do I have here? And so I started creating a database of all these stories that I could use on any topic: networking, connection, leadership, dynamics, strengths, weaknesses, you name it. And I had a story for it. And I practiced that everywhere I went. So for me, practice made permanent. The more I practiced, the more permanent the attitudes, the beliefs, and the techniques became. And soon I started dabbling more into it. And then I would say that, so storytelling became a big part of what I did. And then when the pandemic hit, I started talking to lots of people because, the speaking industry collapsed. And after talking to people, I started noticing 2 themes emerge. Number one is I wanted to do better with my thought leadership brand and leverage LinkedIn and Twitter and all those types of things because digital presence mattered. But the second thing that came up was I need to be better at storytelling. I want to be able to tell stories to my teams. I want to be able to tell stories in my content. I want to be able to tell stories in my videos and my website. I want to tell a story of me as a business. And so I started running workshops on storytelling, and those kind of really took off. And I was like, okay, storytelling is definitely something that's a huge need for a lot of people. And so that's kind of where it came about.
Yeah, that's amazing. you made me remember. Well, as you was talking, you just made me remember a time where I used a story, and it's funny. It just came out that way. But I was always wondering, man. They tell us, hey, in 72 hours. So we had what we call a 72-hour tether, meaning within 72 hours, we would get an order to deploy, and we would have to be ready to go and out. And I was like, you know what? We never ever explained to these young guys that are ready to drop everything and the wife and the kids and everything to just jump on a plane and go across wherever, and then go get a mission done. We never explained to them the why, ever. And you will hardly ever get anybody explain you that in the military. But I went to an academy, and at the academy, I had a country brief, and I said, you know what, I'm going to, let's say, Peru, and so let me choose that country. The big thing was that China and the U.S. were fighting each other for buying steel in Peru, because Peru is a big steel exporter. And then I brought that story back to them when I told them that, hey, we're going on this mission to help Peru, but at the same time, remember, we're also trying to make sure that we're the favorite. Right? We're the favorite that we can buy more steel than anybody else. And so after that, after I told them that story, and it was more detailed, then they were like, "Oh yeah, let's go, let's get this done. Let's build that relationship. Let's get those communication avenues built and in motion." And they were more they anticipated going more than I did, and I was leading the squad, right? So to your point, it is a great connector. Um, to your team. Now, you mentioned earlier, hey, leaders, you have to connect. You have to somehow bridge this gap between employer, employee, a boss, leader, or however you want to call it, and a subject, if you would lack of better words. So, how did you use that in your corporate time, in your time as a leader, to build to bridge that gap?
Sorry, bridge the gap between what?
Between connecting between a leader and a subordinate, let's say.
Yeah, that's interesting because I think one of the things that I was good at in corporate was, having a strong cross-functional team. So, I would always visit people in their cubicles or their offices. I would have a conversation with them. I invite them to join me for lunch. I'd meet them at the coffee station and chat about what they're going, talk about who they are, what they're doing. I find all those different methods were a way for them to create more connection with myself. And I remember there was a tough lawyer when I had to have some regulatory work done, who was very, very scary and intimidating. But I did my best to try to talk to her and ask questions. Sometimes she really shut me down a lot. But I worked at it. I worked on that relationship. And then at one point, she called me to her office and she's like, "Bobby, did you write this?" I said, "Yeah." "You did? Well, tell me how you did." She was explaining. She was very like,
I'm intimidated.
She was intimidated. I was scared, man. She was a strong woman. Like she could beat me up, I bet you. And anyway, she said, "Did you write this?" "Oh yeah." "Tell me how you did." And she's watching me. I'm explaining, "Well, I researched this and wrote this." And I said, "And so, okay." So and then she's like, "It's really good." I'm like, "Really?" "Yeah." It's like, "I just thought you copied it. I didn't realize you researched it and you wrote this. It's really well done." I'm like, "Oh, well, thanks." And after that, she was really, really nice to me. And like, I warmed her over with my work and the relationship building. And then whenever I need something done quickly, "Oh, Bobby, don't worry. I'll get that done. No problem. I'll get it done today." Versus, the 2 week, thing that would happen. And so what would happen was I was able to get people to do things for me quicker or more easily without the obstacles, overcoming things. And I think that worked really well in my favor. To do that. Now, it didn't happen overnight. It took time. It took several months and whatnot for some people. In her case, it took probably 6 months. But once that trust is established, people are more willing to go to bat for you. They're more willing to cut corners for you, and they're more willing to not create obstacles for yourself. So I think that's why it's so inherent for us to do that type of stuff, because it creates more loyalty, and it creates more opportunity, and it creates more overcoming of barriers.
Yeah, it sounds like when she saw your work ethic behind what you did. It sounded like she's a strong work ethic type of woman. And
Yeah,
when
well, she
she
was
kept,
also in legal, so she wanted to make sure I wasn't like plagiarizing anything, right?
right, right, yeah, am I gonna get copyright infringement?
Right, exactly,
but
exactly.
but you struck a chord, and that's the funny part is that here you have this relationship, and it's kind of like you don't know tippy toe, eggshells type. You don't know what you're gonna say wrong, but something you did struck a chord and said, and then now it opened doors, and it's
And
just
as soon as you make that connection, that small bit of connection, it's amazing how the rest just goes way easier. You're moving forward a lot faster. Your arm in arm, hand in hand together, moving forward. It just makes a huge amount of difference. I mean, one of the problems with authoritarian, boss is that if things go bad, people will leave. There's no loyalty. There's no wanting to make a difference on for the greater whole. They're just people are usually end up being miserable. I mean, people do it out of fear, but once that fear subsides, or they're annoyed enough, they're going to leave, or they're not going to produce.
yeah, I agree with that. I've seen it. Let me tell you, I've done it, so I know. But there's a lot of leaders that don't know how to even start on their storytelling. They know their story, right? If they could tell you, you could. Oh, I came from here. Boom, 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 boom. But don't know how to structure it in a way to, and package it in a way to deliver it good enough. And that's what you do. You get people ready. 5-time TEDx speaker is not a easy fit of a feat, right? It's hard to get one, but you've done it 5. So a leader's listening. They're trying to connect with their people. They're trying to bring some level of authenticity to their leadership. What would be your suggestion for them to start thinking about in terms of developing their own personal story?
Well, I think the first thing is to start with your personal brand, right? Do the deep dive work into understanding your brand, your values, your personality traits, your skills, your aptitudes, how people perceive you, what your super strengths are, what people love about you, what people don't love about you. Having a real, honest, authentic deep dive into your personal brand, because most people don't want to do that. They're fearful. First off, it takes work. It takes time. Number two, they're fearful of what people are going to say, but you want to know what they're going to say, because if you're worried that people are going to think you're always late, then why don't you validate that? And if they say you're always late, then stop being late, start being early, start being on time, and change your brand. But I think doing that deep dive work into knowing what your brand is, I think, is the first step, because if you don't have that, you're never going to get clarity on who you are. You're never going to get alignment on the things that you want to do. You're never going to get real focus on where you're trying to go and what your objectives and what you're trying to do. So I think that's the first step. Once you have that, then it'll be much easier for you to put together, now, what's the story that works for me? Who's my target audience? Who am I trying to inspire? How can I be a better leader? Like, how do I get from A to Z? And now how to put a plan in place for that. So first work on the brand, then think about the stories that are going to, that you want to share with people and share with the world. So when I work with people on their story, you start with the brand, then we look at the story in terms of a framework. So the best way to tell a story, structure, but having a framework. There's many frameworks out there you can use, but and I have a framework that I use with the clients that I have. Having a framework to really tell that story of that personal brand story of your life, of who you are, why you're doing what you're doing, and how you make that impact. And even just writing it out and really honing that so that people can see it, and then recording maybe a video for 3 to 5 minutes makes a huge impact on what you're trying to do. And so I always encourage people to do that with their work, because once you have that story and you've shared it with the world, it's going to be easier to talk to people about that story and share nuggets from your life.
Now, you mentioned brand, and it's that is so deceiving at times for people. They believe it may be a logo. They may believe there's a couple of colors that they they always wear. And eventually it could be something like that that's incorporated into it. But what's the difference between brand and things that you can create to represent you? Because a lot of people create logos and it represents them, but they still don't establish a brand.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people misconstrue that. I mean, a brand, of course, has things like logos and elements and colors and style and things like that. But the personal branding experience is the entire memory and emotional experience you give to people, right? So, McDonald's has the big M, that's a logo. But when you pick up a quarter pound of cheese and you're about to put it in your mouth and you're like, oh my God, it's going to taste so good. Oh, and you hear angels sing and you're like, oh, and you're eating that quarter pound of cheese and it's delicious and juicy, if you like them.
Right,
There's an emotional experience there that you love. I'm sharing my memories as a child. I used to love my quarter pounds of cheese. So there's an experience there that you're remembering. So similar with the personal brand, people are going to remember the emotional experience, right? So when they see Bobby speak, they have the funny, they have the stories, they have the heart, they have the emotional accessibility. When they work with someone else, they might have something else. This person is really into data. This other person is really into being on time. This other person is really into colors. And so the emotional experience you give to people, that's what your brand is. So when you think of yourself as a leader, what do you want them to remember about you? What do you want your legacy to be? What do you want people to say about you when you're gone? Do you want them to say, he wore red glasses? I mean, that's fine and dandy, but that's just one aspect of the brand. What you really want them to think about is, what is the emotional experience? What is the story? What is the legacy about who you are? I hope that when, I'm gone, people say, Bobby made a difference. Bobby made me feel at home. Bobby made me feel empowered and supported. And Bobby was fun and warm and humorous. Like, that's what I'm hoping people will say. And so when I think about my brand experience with people, I try to make sure I give them the best possible experience that they'll get, and they'll leave me wanting more, or they'll never forget me.
Yeah, it's wonderful that you bring that up, because we've all had some encounter with leaders. We talk about leaders here tonight that we either don't ever want to see again, or man, I wish I could. I wish I was near, or hey, some people go as far as to some great leaders to say, I'm coming to you. I'm gonna go see you. And I remember this young lady, as she communicated, and it's been a while now since we saw each other or heard from each other. But the last time I spoke to her, she said, we've missed you, but every time I have a decision to make, I always say, what would Enrique do? And it kind of warm my heart, but I was like, man, that's what we say about Jesus, right? So, don't put me too high, but that's what you leave. You talk about legacy, you talk about leaving something for them to hold on to, even when you're not there. It's powerful. You also mentioned, after you get your branding right, and hopefully they'll come to you and get all that squared away. There's a second element there, which is, who you speaking to, who are you speaking to? Because if I go into, a room now, me myself, I'm kind of like you. We'll go into a room and we can command. We have the presence to command the room, right? We just have. But if you're gonna speak about oranges at a banana convention, you're gonna get it wrong. I don't care how much you command it, right? So that target is kind of concentrated or focused at a work site, right? So, what's the difference between having a message and being able to deliver it wherever you are? Because it could not be the right setting, right?
Yeah, I mean, the number one rule for speaking is knowing your audience. So, you may have a message, but if you are talking to an audience in the wrong way with the message, it's not going to work. In fact, I was talking to somebody earlier today about this, that, when it comes to my audience, there's certain things to look at. So, for example, I like to tell personal stories. Some of the stories are personal and funny. Some of them are more deep and emotional and vulnerable. And then I look at case studies of companies, organizations, and people who are doing really cool things in topic X, Y, or Z. And then I look at the data around X, Y, and Z, topic X, Y, and Z. Now, depending on my audience, I will ramp up the data and lower the stories depending on the audience. So, for example, when I'm talking to CEOs, I'll throw in more data, more case studies, and less vulnerable stories. I'll still have them. I'll still have the stories, but I'll do less. When I'm talking to, let's say, a nonprofit organization, I'll ramp up the emotional, vulnerable stories because that really resonates well with that audience. When I'm talking with, let's say, the most frightening audience I ever spoke to was grades 6, 7, and 8, because, I'm not cool. And so I was terrified. And, I threw in a whole bunch of stories about myself. And I basically focus on really funny, vulnerable, self-deprecating stories where I
Right.
look like a fool, and they loved it. They were going crazy all the stuff that I was talking about in grade 6, 7, 8, and I did that to resonate with them, so they would understand what I was talking about. And so you have to mix it up in terms of what kind of data, what kind of stories, vulnerable versus personal, what kind of case studies, and I mix it up depending on my audience in terms of who I'm talking to.
Yeah, that's
And then once you have that, then there's the how you deliver it, right? So the target audience will give you in terms of what to deliver and how to prepare it, what to prepare, and then there's a whole idea of how to actually deliver it, right? So for example, with storytelling, with CEOs, not so vulnerable. With nonprofits, more vulnerable. With kids, more jokes and self-deprecation, right? And that's how I would shift the storytelling between those three different audiences.
and that's wonderful because I mean, for the leaders that are listening, whether you're watching this live now or you're getting a replay, um, knowing that element is key. It's just like even at the work site, right? You're not going to talk to somebody as technical and deep for somebody just coming into the company. They have so much to learn about the company that and how things work. So yeah, and I guess if you're in a technical field, there is some proficiency there. You have to be able to have, but it's still conversations that have to be, either brought down or brought up depending on who you are talking to, even at a company site.
Yeah, no, agreed.
So you've spoken at 5 different TEDx's, and this is amazing because you're the first person that I've ever met that has 5 under their belt. It's like you're looking like what you would call these football players, and Derek Jeter when you're talking about rings and experience.
Well, that's the brand, right? I mean,
Yeah.
and the truth is, I was actually accepted at 8 TEDx talks, but 3 of them I rejected for a certain reason. So you could say
Oh,
I'm an 8-time TEDx accepted, but then I've
except
spoken at 5. Yeah.
look at that. So even better. But were they all in the same context, or did you evolve from the first one and then create a second one, different speaking? How did that?
Yeah, they're all different. I mean, they were all different. So, I mean, what I would say is that the first 4 I got very quickly because I'd already had a very strong brand. People knew who I was. They liked the way I spoke. They saw my videos, and then we want to bring you on stage. So, for each one, I had to develop a different topic. Although the third one, I believe, I was also the MC. I was the host of the show. So, but I told them, I said, I will MC the day, but I also want to deliver my own TEDx talk. So I did that as well. So I MC and I hosted. And then the fifth one didn't happen for many, many years. By the time I was a 4-time TEDx speaker, I was like, that's good branding. Like it looks pretty good. But then, I'd always had TEDx talks in my back of my mind of ones I wanted to do for years. And I also was coaching a lot of people on how to get a TEDx talk. And I'm actually running a TEDx talk boot camp right now on how to land TEDx talks. And we're actually guarantee I will get you a TEDx talk. That's my thing. I guarantee you a TEDx talk. But that fifth one, what happened was there's a theme that came out. And I saw, called the Power of Connection. I was like, Power of Connection. That's my hashtag. That's what I use. I have a Power of Connection chat on Twitter. I use a Power of Connection hashtag on LinkedIn. I gotta submit my talk, and I had to talk about the history and mystery of hugs. And so I was like, I gotta submit that. And so I just quickly recorded a 5-minute video, sent it. They called me the next day, Bobby, we want you. Please come. And so I did that one. And so I think 4 of them came through having a strong leadership brand. People knew who I was. They knew what I talked about. They loved my work. And then the fifth one I applied for and got it.
Well, we're talking about a storytelling, but you mentioned a very powerful piece in the leadership's toolbox, which is the power to connect. Not all the connections come by way of you expressing a story, right? A lot of it comes by how you mentioned, hey, they already knew my brand. They wanted me, at these things before I started going, oh, let me pick this and let me pick that, or even saying, no, not this one, right? Amazing that you would do it, but you did. So let's talk about the power of connection because leaders often also negate that power when it comes to outside sources. Now, in the company, they're connecting, they know people, they're, people know them. But what's what would you say is the critical piece of them connecting outside of the elements of their own, employment?
Well, well, first off, less talking, more listening is the first thing, right? I mean, if you're going to talk, ask questions, right? But then listen, truly listen, understand, and listen to hear the story, listen to what they're going through. And that also leads to empathy, right? Empathy is a tool for us to better understand what people are going through. And it doesn't have to be, and it can be a work thing, but it can also be outside of work thing too. So spending time outside of work to build those relationships, building the bonds of your team as friends goes a long way. I mean, having a boss who's my friend as well as my employee, it goes a long way versus them just being my boss. But I think empathy and listening to understand somebody, I think, go a long, long way. Just take the time to ask questions, find out, and just listen to them, listen to what they're saying, follow up with yes and questions to dive deeper and understand who they are. And then when you get a chance, share a little bit about what you think and where you're coming from and what your journey is. But I think the biggest thing that leaders can do that they don't do enough of is leverage empathy, ask questions, and then just listen to them. And if you show your employees that you are willing to listen with empathy, then that goes a long way. And empathy is something that a lot of people don't understand how it works. But I mean, I would say empathy works in three ways, right? When someone shares something, whatever they're going through, whatever it might be, personal, professional, whatever it might be. Empathy is all about being able to answer three questions. Number one, can I understand what you are feeling? Number two, can I understand why you're feeling that way? And then number three, how can I support those feelings? And a good leader who's empathetic will be able to answer all three of those questions. The third one being the hardest, which is how can I support those feelings?
And that is absolutely right. I've seen a lot of leaders attempt their hand at empathy and can never get to number three.
Yeah.
Either because they just don't want to, really, or they just don't know how to. And going back to the connection piece, if you were connected with the right people, you don't necessarily need to answer that mail, but you can actually get someone that can. And a leader is also able to facilitate the resolution for everybody. And that's where you get the bang for the buck at being a leader, right?
Yeah, a leader can't do everything. I mean, at the end of the day, if you need help or support, they would find someone to help you, right? So for me, I can't do everything. So if someone needs support from me, or I need to bring in someone who's an expert in a certain area, let's say my team needs help with sales. Okay, I'm not a sales guy. Let's bring in an expert on sales to help with them, and so that's okay too. Like a good leader knows what they can do and what they can't do, and they offer support, whether it's through them, but also getting support through other means.
Well, Bobby, tell us a little of this structure that you have helping people, because if somebody is listening right now and saying, "Man, I'm having problems connecting, I'm having problems even, knowing what brand is, I'm having problems." There's a lot of things that a lot of people get wrong. My story, I don't know how to develop that. What's on the horizon for Bobby in terms of what you're getting ready to produce and are helping people with?
Yeah, so I think the first thing is really, again, going into that whole personal branding process, right? Because if you're not clear in your brand, personal branding is a tool to give you clarity, to give you focus, to give you alignment, to give you a direction, to open up to create more light for you to see the path of where you want to go. And that's why personal branding is so important. So that's why a lot of people who are struggling is because they're overwhelmed, or things are uncertain, or they have a mindset issue, or things are dark, or there's too much stuff in front of them and don't know where to go. Personal branding. So what I do is I work with people first to really get clear on that personal brand and identify what is your purpose, what is your objective, what is your direction, who's your target, what do you want to do with, how do you want to leverage your skills and your strengths, and then figure out that path. And once we have that path, then we say, okay, now what do you want to do? Do you want to, get more leads for your business? Do you want to get a new job? you want to transition into something else, right? What exactly is it? So now we say, well, how do we take personal branding and then ramp that to a thought leadership brand? And we look at things like your content creation strategy, your relationship building strategy, your storytelling strategy, your mindset, your confidence, your speaking. How are you leveraging LinkedIn, Twitter, social audio, other platforms? Where's your target audience? And then we put together a plan to help them get to that next level to get that thought leadership brand. Because once you get that thought leadership brand, then if you're looking for a job, you're going to get more opportunities and leads. If you're trying to build a business, you're going to get more leads for your business. If you're trying to become a speaker, get a TEDx talk, or get a book deal, your thought leadership brand will attract people to you so that you can start doing more of those things. So that's kind of where I take people. You start with that personal brand, get clarity on where we're trying to go, and then we go that path of content, storytelling, speaking, relationship building, all that kind of stuff to get to that next level. That's what I do.
Absolutely wonderful. Now, if they wanted to get a hold of you now, I know here on LinkedIn you're here. You've been
Right.
here. This is your grail. But what other places can they get a hold of you if they chose to have, I live on LinkedIn. That's where I'm at. I don't have the multiple things, although I do have repeated. But if they wanted to get a hold of you, how would they do that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm mostly everywhere, but my primary platforms are for business are LinkedIn, Twitter, Clubhouse, and Instagram. Those are probably my 4 big ones that I use. My website is rayallen.com for speaking and training and coaching, and then I have a personal branding site called dypp.ca, which stands for discoverypersonalbrand.ca. So dypp.ca. So yeah, you can find me everywhere. Just look me up and Google me. I'm everywhere.
Outstanding. I'm gonna make sure that we get that in the comment. Marilyn, thank you for being with us tonight. She was like, "Hey, I don't know if it's my phone or the computer, but I'm glad you fixed that, and you caught us before we go." Now, folks, we've been talking about leadership and storytelling. We threw some other things in there as the process of conversation, but Bobby is world renowned. It's I followed him since I started on LinkedIn, and he's gone like skyrocketed. You see the 5-time, 8-time, 5-time actual. So let's get that right. But Bobby, I thank you so much for being with me, sharing this time, sharing what you do, and I hope that this has enriched you as a leader, folks that are listening. And if you need to reach out to Bobby, you know where to connect it. But I'm going to make sure to put that in there. I have a couple of announcements before we go. I'm actually speaking on TEDx, not TEDx, but Podfest. That's my future, Bobby. I was forecasting that. But I'll be at Podfest. We've been there for 2 days. Tomorrow is the last day. I'll be speaking about LinkedIn Live proper. So hopefully you're around the Orlando area. You can join me. And there's a lot of things that we do here on LinkedIn Live that we would like to share with everybody. So if you have a leadership topic or a leader that you would like to see on Aloha Friday Live, let me know in the DM or in the comments. I would like to entertain that. But tonight, it's all Bobby, Umar, for helping us take our leadership brand and make it a story and bring it to the world. So, Bobby, thank you so much. Aloha, everybody. We'll see you next week.